Maya raised the concern in the team meeting on a Tuesday. She had documentation, emails, a timeline. She had watched the same problem surface 3 times in 6 months and had tracked every instance carefully. She presented it clearly and professionally. Her manager listened, nodded, and then told her she might be misreading the situation, that the pattern she was seeing wasn't quite what she thought it was, that maybe she was being a little oversensitive about this one. Maya left the meeting wondering if he was right. He wasn't, but by the time she figured that out, she had spent 4 months doubting her own judgment in a workplace that had been systematically undermining it. What happened to Maya has a name, and it isn't a personal failure, a communication problem, or a sensitivity issue. It's gaslighting. And it happens in workplaces more often than most employees ever recognize, because the people doing it are often not even fully aware they're doing it. The mechanism runs on its own once it starts, and it is specifically designed to make you question the one thing that would protect you: your own perception of what is actually happening. Here are 7 signs your workplace is gaslighting you. Sign 1. You leave conversations feeling confused about things you were certain of going in. You walked into a meeting knowing what happened. You had the emails. You remembered the conversation. You were clear. And then somewhere in the exchange, through tone, through reframing, through being asked to consider whether you might have misunderstood, your certainty dissolved. That's not a disagreement. That's a rewrite. You leave the room no longer sure of what you know. Not because the facts changed, because someone in that room needed you to be unsure of them. Here's the distinction that matters. In a legitimate disagreement, both parties acknowledge the same facts and interpret them differently. In gaslighting, one party disputes the facts themselves, not the interpretation, the facts. One challenges your interpretation, the other challenges your memory. Those are not the same thing. When someone tells you that what you clearly remember happening didn't happen that way, that's not a difference of perspective. That's a rewriting of reality. And it is the most foundational sign of a workplace that has decided your perception is something to be managed. Sign 2. And this is the one that catches people completely off guard. Your concerns get reframed as personality flaws. You raise a legitimate problem. And instead of the problem being addressed, you become the problem. You're told you're being too sensitive, too negative, not a team player, reading too much into things. The issue you raised disappears from the conversation. The conversation is now about you. The problem didn't disappear. You did. Here's the mechanism. When an organization cannot or will not address a legitimate concern, the most effective way to neutralize it is to discredit the person raising it. Not by proving the concern is wrong, by suggesting the person raising it is emotionally unreliable. Once that framing takes hold, everything you say going forward gets filtered through it. Your credibility becomes the question rather than the content of your concern. This is why gaslighting is particularly effective against high performers who care deeply about their work. The more invested you are, the easier it is to reframe your legitimate concerns as emotional overinvestment. But here's the sign that most people dismiss the longest, because it's the most uncomfortable to accept. Sign 3. You apologize constantly, but you can never identify what you actually did wrong. You say sorry reflexively, in meetings, in emails, at the start of sentences that don't require an apology. You have developed a habit of preemptive softening, cushioning everything you say before anyone pushes back. You couldn't explain specifically what you're apologizing for. You just feel, persistently, like you're doing something wrong. You're not apologizing for something you did. You're apologizing for existing in a space that keeps making you feel like you're wrong. That feeling is not your conscience. It is the residue of a sustained campaign to make you feel responsible for things that are not your responsibility. When an environment consistently responds to your presence with subtle disapproval, the slight tone shift, the impatient sigh, the look exchanged between colleagues, you internalize it. Your nervous system starts generating apology before your brain has time to evaluate whether one is warranted. Chronic, unnecessary apology is not a personality trait. It is a symptom. It means someone has been telling you, directly or through behavior, that your instincts, your opinions, and your presence require constant justification. Sign 4. You're told that no one else has a problem with this. You raise something, and the response is that you're the only one who sees it this way. Everyone else is fine. No one else has raised this concern. The rest of the team doesn't seem to be having this issue. Other people have the same concern. They just watched what happened when you raised it. This move is specifically effective because it isolates you. It takes your concern, which felt shared, which you believed others also felt, and reframes it as a personal idiosyncrasy. The implication is clear. If everyone else is fine and you're not, the problem is you. Here's what's usually true. The "no one else has a problem" response is less a statement of fact and more a management technique. It is designed to make your concern feel irrational rather than valid, and it works because most people find it more bearable to believe they're wrong than to believe they're the only one willing to say what everyone knows. But here's what happened to Maya when she finally stopped believing that version of the story. She started keeping a private journal. Not for any formal purpose, just because she had noticed that her memory of conversations was being questioned often enough that she needed an external record she could trust. She went back to the emails. The timeline she had built was accurate. The pattern she had identified was real. She had not misread the situation. What she had done was raise it in an environment that had no interest in addressing it, and every interest in making sure she stopped. The journal saved her. Sign 5. The history of what happened keeps changing. Decisions made in meetings you attended are now remembered differently. Commitments made to you are no longer commitments. They were suggestions or preliminary discussions or things said in a different context. The conversation you clearly remember having is now characterized as a misunderstanding. Because the moment you stop trusting your own record, you have lost your most important tool for navigating accurately. When the organizational record keeps shifting to accommodate whatever the current convenient narrative is, you are not experiencing miscommunication. You are experiencing the systematic revision of shared reality. Write it down, the date, the conversation, what was said, what was agreed, what later got revised. Not because you're planning to take action, because an external record of your own perception is the most powerful thing you can have in an environment that has been systematically undermining it. Sign 6. You feel anxious, exhausted, and uncertain in a way you can't explain to anyone outside the situation. You try to describe what's happening to someone you trust, and you can hear how it sounds. Vague. A series of small things that individually seem minor and collectively feel devastating. You say things like, "I know it sounds stupid, but," or "maybe I'm just being paranoid," or "I can't really explain it, but something is wrong." That difficulty articulating it is not evidence that nothing is happening. It is evidence that what is happening was designed to be difficult to articulate. Gaslighting doesn't leave visible marks. It leaves confusion. It leaves exhaustion. It leaves the specific emotional signature of someone who has been working very hard to trust a reality that keeps being rearranged around them. If you feel this way, chronically uncertain, persistently anxious, constantly second-guessing observations you would have trusted 12 months ago, that feeling is information, not proof of anything specific, a signal that something in your environment is costing you more than work should cost. Sign 7, and this is the one that arrives last and does the most damage. You have started to believe their version of you. You used to trust your judgment. You used to speak up without running it through a filter first. You used to know what you thought and say it. Somewhere in the past year that changed. You now see yourself the way the environment has been describing. You, oversensitive, difficult, someone who needs to work on their communication style. That version of you was built by people who needed you smaller. You have internalized a description of yourself that was constructed by people who needed you to be quieter and easier to manage. That version is not accurate. It is useful to them. Here's what to do with all 7 signs. Start keeping a record. Dates, conversations, what was said, what was agreed, what later got revised. Not for anyone else, for yourself. Stop apologizing reflexively. Before you say sorry, ask yourself what specifically you are apologizing for. If you can't answer that question in one sentence, don't say it. Talk to someone outside the situation. A trusted friend, a therapist, a mentor who has no stake in the organization's version of events. The external perspective won't resolve anything on its own, but it will give you a reference point for your own reality that the environment cannot reach and cannot revise. And then make a clear-eyed decision about whether this is a situation that can be changed, or one that needs to be exited. Maya left 8 months after that Tuesday meeting. She told me the hardest part wasn't the job search or the transition. It was realizing how much of what she had believed about herself in those 8 months had been put there by an environment that needed her to doubt herself in order to keep her manageable. She hadn't been oversensitive. She had been right, and the organization had spent 8 months making sure she couldn't trust that.